Deep beneath the waves of New Zealand's coast lies a cursed treasure, an ancient Maori artifact, one that was never meant to be disturbed. When it resurfaces, the deadly wrath of the sea awakens. Divers, thrill-seekers, and curious souls who dare to touch it begin to vanish, leaving behind only mysterious whispers of the sea's vengeance. But there's one person who might be able to stop it, a marine biologist caught in the eye of the storm. Will she unlock the dark secrets of the artifact before the ocean claims her too? The clock is ticking, and the sea is watching. The sea has always held mysteries, its depths hiding secrets older than time itself. But some secrets, better left, forgotten, can awaken with terrifying consequences. In this story, a group of divers retrieves a necklace from the bottom of the ocean. At first, it's just a strange relic, shark teeth strung together, seemingly harmless. But as soon as it's brought to the surface, strange and deadly events begin to unfold. Lena Tai, a marine biologist who has always respected the ocean, becomes embroiled in a nightmare she never expected. As people around her start dying or vanishing, the necklace is revealed to be more than just a piece of ancient jewelry. It's a curse, a relic of a dark and ancient offering to Tangaroa, the Maori god of the sea. The teeth once belonged to the guardians of the ocean, bound by an ancient pact to protect the sea's secrets. But the curse is far from over. Now, the ocean is calling for what was taken. Lena must race against time, battling forces beyond human comprehension. With her life at stake and the lives of those she loves hanging in the balance, Lena must uncover the truth behind the necklace's origin and return it to the depths before the wrath of Tangaroa consumes her. But there's a catch. Each step closer to the truth brings her further into the ocean's deadly embrace. Will Lena find a way to break the curse? Or will the ocean take everything she holds dear? Watch to uncover the terrifying secrets that lie beneath the waves and find out how far Lena will go to save herself and the world. Story number 1. Jess Morgan stood at the edge of the dusty rural auction hall, feeling the weight of the stone in her hands. It wasn't the kind of thing she usually gravitated toward. The auctioneer had been practically giving it away, and to most of the others in the room, it was just an old, unattractive piece of rock. But for Jess, it was different. As the curator for Auckland's prestigious Te Papa Museum, she knew when something had significance. This particular artifact was carved in intricate patterns that hinted at something far older and more dangerous than anything she had ever come across. "Are you sure you want that, Miss Morgan?" The old Maori woman at the back of the room eyed her with a mixture of curiosity and warning. Jess smiled politely, but a chill ran down her spine. "Yes, thank you. I'll take it." Kaori Raukawa, a Maori historian who had become a close ally in Jess's research, had warned her against it. "That stone has a bad history," he had said, his deep voice laced with unease. "It's not just an artifact. It's tied to something darker. You'd do well to leave it where you found it." But Jess, driven by an ambition she barely understood herself, ignored his advice. The stone was special. She could feel it. It had an energy about it that made her pulse quicken. Her job was to unearth the past, to understand its secrets. And this was one secret that, like many others, she was determined to uncover, no matter the cost. The first night the stone arrived in her apartment, Jess didn't sleep. It wasn't because she didn't want to. It was because something was there with her, an invisible presence, shifting just out of sight, as if it were lurking in the dark corners of her mind. The next morning, she noticed the whispers. They were soft at first, like a distant conversation, then louder, words in a language she couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. Malicious, haunting. Te reo Maori, Jess murmured to herself as the sounds echoed in her brain. She had heard the language before during her research with Kauri, but this wasn't the welcoming, warm language of history. This was something ancient, something that didn't want to be found. It was only a matter of days before the full extent of the haunting began to reveal itself. At night, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through her apartment, though no one else was there. She'd go into the kitchen, check the locks, the windows, nothing. Just the echoing footfalls, relentless, pacing the hallways back and forth. The whispers followed too, always speaking in that strange, eerie language, now accompanied by a low growl that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. Then there were the dreams. Horrible, vivid dreams of being trapped underwater, unable to breathe. Eyes. Huge, dark eyes, staring at her from the depths. A massive shadow, its claws reaching out from the darkness, pulling her deeper. She would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, but the feeling lingered. Something was watching her. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting. Kauri, when he heard of Jess's experiences, finally gave in and shared more about the stone. "It's not just a relic," he said, his voice trembling with something Jess had never heard before. "It's a taniwa, a guardian spirit, yes, but one who's been corrupted over time, twisted by betrayal and desecration." Jess frowned. "A taniwa?" "A water spirit," Corey explained. "Ancient, powerful, but they're not always kind. They guard you, things, places, people. But if they're wronged, they turn vengeful. This stone, it's tied to a taniwa that once protected a sacred river, but it was stolen, taken from its resting place, desecrated by outsiders. It's been angry ever since." The more Jess learned, the more she realized she had made a terrible mistake. The stone hadn't been discovered. It had been left for someone to find. The taniwa's spirit had chosen her, or perhaps it was her own bloodline that had drawn it to her. "Why me?" Jess asked one evening, pacing back and forth, the stone sitting ominously on her coffee table. Corey's face was grim. "It's your lineage. You're connected to the original betrayal, Jess. Your ancestors. They were part of the group who desecrated the taniwa's resting place. They took it from its rightful place, angering the spirit." Jess froze, feeling the air around her grow thick with tension. Her own history, the very legacy she had tried to escape, was coming back to claim her. The hauntings grew more intense. The whispers became screams. The growls turned into snarls. Jess's once vibrant world began to unravel, the walls closing in around her. She could feel the taniwa's presence everywhere, an all-consuming force of fury and grief. One evening, after hours of fruitless research, Jess came to a horrifying realization. The curse wasn't something she could study out of existence. The taniwa wasn't going to leave until its stone was returned to its sacred place, its true resting place. Desperate, Jess took the stone and made her way to the river Kari had spoken of, the river the taniwa had once protected. The night was thick with fog as she made her way along the bank, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was still, but beneath the silence she could feel the taniwa, watching, waiting. With a final, trembling breath, Jess knelt beside the river and held the stone aloft. "I return it to you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I return it to its rightful place." The ground trembled. The water rippled as if something enormous stirred beneath the surface. The taniwa's angry roar shook the night air. But Jess didn't flinch. She dropped the stone into the river. For a moment, all was still. Then the whispers stopped. the footsteps ceased. The weight that had pressed against Jess's mind lifted, and the world felt suddenly lighter. But just as quickly, a shadow loomed over her. A huge, dark figure rose from the water, its eyes glowing with an ancient fury. The Taniwha had accepted her offering, but it was not done with her. As it disappeared into the depths, Jess understood that the curse wasn't truly lifted. It would never truly be gone. The Taniwha, though subdued for now, would always linger, watching, waiting. Jess had returned the stone, but her fate was now tied to the Taniwha's restless spirit, forever. The whispers would never stop. Story number 2. Ethan Reed had never been one to believe in ghosts, or curses, or anything that couldn't be explained with a good dose of logic. That was why, when his girlfriend Sarah dragged him to a remote Maori village for a weekend getaway, he didn't give much thought to the pendant he bought from the market stall. It was a small thing, the pendant. The bone was polished to a soft sheen, etched with intricate patterns that seemed almost alive in the dim light of the stall. It caught his eye as he stood next to Sarah, who was busy admiring a hand-woven cloak. "Hey, check this out," Ethan called, holding the pendant up to her. "It's kinda creepy, don't you think?" Sarah smiled, amused. "It's beautiful," she said. "I bet it has some deep meaning or connection to the village." The elderly vendor, a thin man with a weathered face, had warned them both. "It's carved by the bone carver. His art is powerful. Dangerous even," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan chuckled, handing over the cash. "It's just a pendant, right?" The man didn't smile. "Remember, not everything is what it seems." The first night they spent in the village was uneventful. The air was cool and crisp. The sky stretched out in a blanket of stars above them. They ate dinner, laughed over wine, and fell asleep in their cozy cabin with the sound of distant waves lapping at the shore. But Sarah wasn't the first to feel it. The next morning, as they prepared for a walk through the village, Sarah began to complain of a headache. By the time they reached the beach, her vision was blurry and she stumbled, nearly falling into the surf. "Ethan!" "I don't feel right," she murmured, clutching his arm tightly. He steadied her, frowning. "You look pale. Maybe it's just the travel, or the heat." But it wasn't the heat, not by a long shot. By that evening, Sarah had become withdrawn, her face gaunt, her movements slow and uncoordinated. She couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, muttering things under her breath in a language Ethan couldn't understand. At one point, she stood up in the middle of the night, staring at the wall as if something were standing there, watching. Ethan thought she was simply exhausted, maybe even a little dehydrated. But when she collapsed at breakfast the next morning, her body jerking unnaturally as though gripped by some unseen force, he started to feel a creeping unease. It wasn't until he found the pendant, lying on the floor, its bone surface cracked and darkened, that he began to connect the dots. He remembered the old man's warning, the bone carver's pendant, and the way Sarah's condition had worsened ever since she started wearing it. The village elder, Inaru, was the one who explained everything. Ethan, now desperate, had gone to him that afternoon, clutching Sarah's unconscious body in his arms. Inaru listened quietly, his face stone cold as Ethan spoke. When he finished, the elder sighed deeply. "You're not the first to fall into the carver's trap," Inaru said. "The bone carver was a master craftsman. He carved things from his own bones, made powerful talismans from his flesh. But his spirit was not content with mere death. He wanted more. He wanted to possess a body. And so he made the pendants, each one holding a sliver of his real bone. He thought, if enough people wore them one day, someone would be vulnerable enough for him to take." Ethan's heart raced. "You're saying the pendant is alive?" Unearthed nodded. More or less, the carver's spirit is bound to each piece, and when the pendant is worn, it begins to take control. The first victim will feel the effects slowly: headaches, nausea, dizziness, but then the spirit begins to twist them, filling their mind with dark visions, making them do things they can't explain. And when the spirit is strong enough, it will take over completely. But Sarah, Ethan choked out, she's not like that. She doesn't. The spirit's influence is strong, Unearthed interrupted. It feeds off of their weakness. It needs a host. If it cannot have Sarah, it will choose someone else. Like you. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. No. That night, Ethan tried to take the pendant from Sarah's neck, but as his fingers brushed against the bone, he felt something cold and sharp shoot through his hand. He yanked it away, staring in disbelief at the deep, jagged gash on his palm. The pendant pulsed. Just for a moment, it seemed to shimmer with some unseen energy. As the hours passed, Ethan could feel the pendant calling to him. He began to hear whispers, faint and distant at first, like the wind through the trees. But as the night grew darker, the whispers became clearer, more insistent. By morning, Sarah had regained some semblance of clarity, but it didn't last long. She was on the edge of something dark and deep, and Ethan knew that if he didn't act soon, she wouldn't be the only one. Ethan found the bone carver's workshop hidden behind an old stone wall at the edge of the village. The room was small and dark, filled with the stench of old wood and something far more sinister. It was there, among the dust and shadows, that he found the carvings, bones twisted into grotesque shapes, each one a testament to the carver's obsession. But it was the final carving that took his breath away. A statue, intricate and horrifying, of a man whose bones had been carved into the shape of a body, hollowed out as though awaiting something. The face was unmistakable. It was Makutu, the bone carver. The pendant was there too, on a shelf, glowing faintly with the same eerie light Ethan had seen in the village. His hand shook as he reached for it, ready to destroy it, to end the curse. But as soon as he touched the pendant, a surge of power coursed through him. His vision blurred. The whispers grew louder, filling his mind. He dropped the pendant, to the floor in panic, but it was too late. A force stronger than anything he could comprehend took hold of him. The carver's spirit began to crawl into his mind, slipping through the cracks in his sanity. "No!" Ethan screamed, clutching his head. But the spirit was already there, already inside. With one final, desperate act, Ethan smashed the pendant against the stone floor, shattering it into pieces. For a moment, everything was still. But as he looked down at his shaking hands, Ethan realized the truth. The spirit of Makutu had escaped. It had entered him. Ethan's eyes went wide, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel it, a dark presence swirling inside him, pushing at the edges of his consciousness. And he knew, in that moment, that the bone carver's revenge was only just beginning. Story number 3. Nina Wills sat in her cramped tattoo studio, staring at the design she had just finished sketching. Her eyes flicked over the intricate swirls, the bold lines, and the curves of the Maori tomoko she had been asked to replicate. The tattoo was unlike anything she had ever done before. It was a traditional design, but there was something off about it. Something dark, something that made her skin crawl. She had been struggling in her career, trying to get noticed, trying to make a name for herself in the tattoo world. There were plenty of clients who came in, but they were usually looking for the same tired designs, tribal patterns, simple words, meaningless symbols. Nothing that had the weight and significance of true art, but this design, this one was different. The client, a man with a deep scar on his face and an air of mystery about him, had given her the sketch. He'd been clear about one thing. He wanted it done exactly as it was drawn. No changes, no deviations. Nina had agreed without hesitation. Fame had always been just one great piece of work away, and this could be it. It started with Blake, her first client who agreed to get the tattoo. Blake was a local bartender, tall and broad with tattoos of his own, but nothing like the intricate Maori design she had just inked. He had been thrilled when he saw the finished piece, running his fingers over it, admiring the boldness. That night, everything seemed fine, but by the morning, Blake was unrecognizable. Nina had just finished cleaning up the shop when Blake burst through the door, eyes wide, skin slick with sweat. His hands trembled as he clawed at his chest where the tattoo lay. "It burns. It hurts. Like fire," he gasped. His voice was strained, desperate, like something inside him was trying to claw its way out. Nina rushed to his side, but before she could touch him, Blake collapsed, his body jerking violently. He screamed, but it wasn't the kind of scream Nina had ever heard before. It was raw, animalistic, like something was being torn from him. In the next few minutes, Blake fell, silent. His eyes rolled back into his head, and the tattoo on his chest began to shift, the ink writhing beneath his skin. Nina backed away, her heart pounding. What the hell was happening? Blake was dead by the time the ambulance arrived. The next few days were a blur. Nina couldn't stop thinking about Blake and the strange, violent reaction to the tattoo. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had been unleashed, but she couldn't explain why. She tried to go on with her life, doing what she always did, tattooing, working, scraping by. But the memory of Blake's screaming face haunted her, and she couldn't ignore the strange pull of that cursed design. Then the nightmares began. Every night, Nina would dream of the same thing, a warrior standing tall and proud in a field of fire. His eyes were cold, empty, and his body was covered in tattoos, just like the one she had done for Blake. But in the dream, the tattoos weren't just skin deep. They were alive, moving and shifting, as if they were trying to escape. The warrior would turn to her, his lips curling into a cruel smile, and in his eyes she saw the blood, his blood, deep in the ink. The warrior would whisper in her ear over and over again, "You unleashed me, Nina." The dream always ended the same way. Nina would wake up, gasping for air, her body drenched in sweat, her heart racing. The more clients Nina tattooed with the design, the worse it got. People would come in asking for the same thing, admiring the intricate beauty of the tomoko. But once it was done, they would begin to suffer. Nightmares, madness, pain, and, like Blake, some of them wouldn't survive. One night, as Nina sat in her studio, her mind racing with guilt and fear, the door to the shop opened. She looked up, her heart stopping for a moment when she saw Tama, the Maori spiritual guide who had visited her once before, standing in the doorway. Tama's face was grim, his eyes clouded with sorrow. He had known her work, known her struggle, but now he knew something darker. "You've awoken something, Nina," Tama said softly, stepping inside. Something that should never have been disturbed. Nina trembled. "What are you talking about? It's just a tattoo. A piece of art." Tama shook his head. "It's not just art. It's a sigil, a summoning. That design you inked. It's the mark of Tawera, a warrior whose spirit was bound into the ink long ago." Nina stared at him, confused. "Tawera? What do you mean, bound?" I didn't do anything but replicate a design." Tama's expression darkened. "The ink is not just ink. It was made from the blood of Tewera. His life, his death, is tied into it. The design is a curse, Nina. A summoning. When you tattoo it on someone, you call his spirit back into this world." Nina's heart pounded in her chest. No, that can't be right." Tama's voice was low, filled with the weight of ancient knowledge. "The warrior was cursed, his body desecrated after he died. His blood, his spirit was used to create a tattoo that would summon him when the time was right. And you have drawn him back." Nina knew she had to stop. She had to end it before more people suffered. But the design was everywhere now. People begged her for it. They wanted it, and she didn't know how to stop. That night, after another round of terrible dreams, she decided to face Tewera. She would find a way to destroy the tattoo's power, but when she tried to remove the design from the walls of her shop, she found that the ink wouldn't come off. It was as though it had become part of the very fabric of her existence, seeping deep into the wood, the metal, the air. She tried to burn it, but the flames only seemed to feed it. It wasn't until she looked in the mirror, her own face pale with terror, that she realized the truth. Tewera wasn't just in the tattoo. The spirit had already begun to take hold of her. Nina felt it then. The pull, the dark presence growing inside her, spreading like poison through her veins. The warrior's voice echoed in her mind, demanding blood. The last thing she remembered before the darkness took over was hearing Tewera's voice in her ear, cold and cruel. "You freed me, Nina, and now you are mine." And just like that, the tattoo that screamed became part of her. Story number 4. Maya Teirangi had always been fascinated by the past. It was the reason she had become an archaeologist. Her love for history, for digging into the earth and uncovering secrets that had been buried long before she was born. But when she found the Punamu mirror in her grandmother's attic, she had no idea it would pull her into a world darker than anything she had ever studied. The attic smelled like dust and old wood, a musty scent that reminded Maya of childhood, visits to her grandmother, Nan Hine. Nan had lived in the same house for decades, a sprawling old place on the outskirts of town, filled with memories of another time. Maya had always loved exploring the attic, but it had been years since she last stepped foot in the cluttered space. She had been up there to find a few old family heirlooms to take with her after Nan's passing. Nan had left her everything. Books, jewelry, photos, but Maya hadn't expected to find much else of interest. Until she came across a covered box tucked behind old quilts and dusty books. The box was small, made of dark wood, and when Maya opened it, she found a mirror, its frame carved from dark greenstone. The Punamu shimmered faintly in the dim light, and for a moment Maya simply stared at it, captivated by its beauty. But then she noticed something odd. The mirror wasn't reflecting her. It wasn't showing anything at all, really. It was as if the glass had become a black void, swallowing everything around it. Intrigued, Maya moved closer, tilting the mirror at different angles, trying to catch a glimpse of something, anything, but it remained empty, like a deep, endless space. That night, after returning to her apartment, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something about the mirror was wrong. It didn't feel like a simple object, like something she could just place on a shelf and forget about. She placed it on the table and stared at it until sleep claimed her. The next morning, Maya felt an unease gnawing at her. She didn't want to touch the mirror again, but when she passed by it, she felt compelled to look. And that's when she saw it. The reflection. At first, it was just a blur, like a mist over her own face. But then she saw the figure clearly. A woman standing in the reflection, someone she didn't recognize. The woman was crying, her face twisted with pain, and her eyes, they were full of terror. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she reached out to touch the mirror. The glass felt warm against her fingertips, unnaturally warm, as if something lived inside it. Then the image of the woman disappeared, and in its place, Maya saw herself standing in the same spot. But something was different. Something terrible. The reflection of herself was holding a knife, blood dripping from the blade. Over the following days, more strange things happened. As Maya looked into the mirror, she began seeing scenes, violent, tragic deaths, play out like a twisted premonition. One night, she saw Jonah, her brother, lying on the ground in the middle of a forest, his body broken and lifeless. The next day, he tripped over a rock while hiking and sprained his ankle. At first, she dismissed the incidents as coincidences. But then she saw it again, Nan Hine. She saw her grandmother's body lying on the floor of the old house, a broken vase at her side, her face contorted in agony. Maya rushed to her grandmother's house that evening, but it was too late. Nan had collapsed while gardening, her heart giving out unexpectedly. The mirror, she realized, wasn't showing ordinary reflections. It was showing the fates of those around her, death, suffering, tragedy, and they were all starting to come true. Desperate for answers, Maya turned to Nan's old journals, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain the mirror. As she sifted through the pages, one entry caught her eye. The mirror was made by Te Kauri, the Tohunga, Nan had written, the spirit of a priest who was betrayed during the colonial massacre, his life bound into the Punamu, his curse left to linger. He sought vengeance through his death, and the mirror was made to reflect the darkness of the soul, the fate of the living. Te Kauri was a priest from an ancient Maori tribe, one who had been wronged during the violent, bloody confrontations with the settlers. His death had been cruel, his spirit bound to the mirror, cursed to show the darkest fate of anyone who gazed into it. The mirror wasn't just an object, it was a vessel for his vengeful spirit. Maya felt the weight of the discovery press on her chest. The mirror had been passed down through generations of her family, each one unknowingly inheriting the curse. And now, Maya had inherited it. Things worsened as the visions became more vivid, more intense. The mirror's curse was growing stronger, and soon, Maya started to see things she couldn't explain. Her own death. The reflection showed her standing over someone, holding a bloodied knife as her own blood spilled onto the floor. She saw herself in the reflection, but it wasn't her fate she was seeing. It was the fate of someone she loved. She was the killer. In horror, Maya turned to Nan Hine, hoping the wise elder would have an answer, a solution to break the curse. But Nan only shook her head, tears in her eyes. "It's too late, Maya," Nan said quietly. "The mirror has shown its truth. You must break it before it consumes you all." But Maya couldn't stop. The pull of the mirror was too strong, the curse too deep. She had to end it. She couldn't let it take any more. In a moment of desperate resolve, Maya took the mirror in her hands, her fingers trembling as she lifted it above her head. The spirit of Te Kauri howled in fury, the mirror shaking with the force of his anger. But she couldn't stop now. With one final violent motion, Maya smashed the mirror against the floor. The glass shattered, the room filling with the sound of breaking glass. Maya fell back, her heart racing as she breathed in the silence that followed. She had done it. The curse was over. But when she looked down at her hand, she gasped. One shard of the greenstone mirror had embedded itself deep. into her palm. The blood from her wound dripped onto the floor, but the pain didn't seem to matter. The shard pulsed with an eerie glow, as if it were alive, as if it were still a part of the mirror's curse. Maya's heart sank. The curse wasn't gone. It was still inside her, and now Takari had found a new vessel to claim. The mirror was shattered, but its spirit was far from finished. Story number 5. James Hall had always seen opportunity where others saw decay. The kind of opportunity that made money, and that's what he was all about. So, when he stumbled upon the old Maori, a dusty, abandoned tribal meeting house on the edge of the North Island, he saw nothing but potential. The land was huge, its views stunning, and the Maori, though worn and forgotten, was solid. It was the perfect location for a luxury lodge, something that could attract wealthy tourists and business people looking for a taste of Maori culture. Of course, he knew there was history tied to the Maori. Every piece of land in New Zealand had its history, didn't it? But James had long stopped worrying about things like that. Business was business, and the locals weren't around to make a fuss anymore. He figured he'd buy the land, get the permits, and turn the place into something that could put him on the map. He even thought the traditional Maori design of the marae would give his project a unique edge. He'd make it shine with gold faucets and high-end linens, blending history with luxury. He'd never intended to return to his Maori roots. His mother had told him stories when he was a child, but it all seemed distant, like something from another lifetime. His father had left when he was young, and his connection to that part of himself was as thin as a spider's thread. It didn't take long for things to go wrong. James had moved into the house next to the marae with his daughter, Lily, to oversee the conversion. It was supposed to be temporary, just a few months of paperwork, contractors, and design meetings, but something about the place made it feel like he was being watched. At night, he could hear strange sounds, a low rumble that echoed through the walls of his house. Sometimes it sounded like the wind, but other times it was different. The rhythmic beats, the chanting. He'd lie in bed, frozen, listening to what could only be described as haka, those ancient Maori war chants that stirred something deep in the bones. At first, he thought it was the wind, or maybe the pipes in the old house. But it wasn't. It was the haka, clear and insistent, a sound so ancient and filled with rage that James couldn't ignore it. One night, unable to sleep, he went outside to investigate. The air was thick, with fog, the moon casting long, thin shadows across the land. The haka was louder now, almost as if it were coming from the marae itself. As he stood there, his breath fogging in the cool air, he saw them. Shadows, moving in the flickering light of the moon. Warriors, their faces painted, wearing ceremonial garb, feathers and bone, the sharp gleam of carved jade hanging from their necks. They moved in precise formation, their feet slapping the earth with an intensity that made James's heart race. He stood there, rooted to the spot, too stunned to move, watching as the spectral warriors danced and chanted, their voices rising in a wave of fury. Then they vanished, as suddenly as they had appeared. James tried to shake it off the next day. It was just his imagination, he told himself. Or maybe some old Maori ritual that had been passed down, still alive in the air around the marae. But the next night, the haka came again. And the next. And the next. Each night, louder, angrier. Lily, who had been quiet and reserved since they moved in, was the first to mention it. "Daddy," she said one morning, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. "I saw them too. The warriors. They told me something." James froze. "What are you talking about, Lily?" "They said we shouldn't be here," she whispered, clutching her teddy bear like it was a lifeline. "They said we don't belong." The next few weeks were a blur of strange occurrences. It wasn't just the haka anymore. At night, James would hear footsteps around the house as if someone were pacing the halls. He would turn on the lights, and they would stop. But when he turned the lights off again, they would start once more. Lily began to speak in her sleep, muttering words in a language James couldn't understand, her small hands clutching at the sheets. James felt the weight of the place pressing down on him, but he had already invested too much money, time, effort to turn back now. The lodge would happen, no matter what. Then, one night, Lily's behavior began to change. She was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing with crayons, when James saw it. A flicker in her eyes, a strange gleam that wasn't hers. She lifted her pencil, her fingers curling around it like a fist, and drew a face. A war chief's face. Fierce and stern, covered in tattoos and scars. She muttered under her breath, something in Maori, and as she spoke, James felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He tried to shake it off. Maybe she was just playing, mimicking what she had seen in her dreams. But when she stood up, her eyes glazed over, her body stiff, he felt something cold seep into the room. Lily turned to him, her voice low and unfamiliar. "I am Wira, protector of the land. I will not let you take it." James's heart pounded in his chest. The words were clear, but they were not his daughter's. They came from somewhere deeper. The war chief, Wira, had entered his daughter's body, the ancestral protector of the Maori, furious and vengeful. And now he was inside her, demanding justice. James couldn't bear to see his daughter like this, but no matter what he did, Wira's presence wouldn't leave. Lily's voice would sometimes return to normal, but more often than not, she would slip into a trance, speaking in Wira's voice, her tiny hands balled into fists as if preparing for battle. The haka grew louder each night. The shadows around the Maori became darker, thicker, more aggressive. And every time James tried to talk to Rangi, the tribal spokesperson who had been warning him about the land, Rangi's expression grew more and more desperate. "You don't understand, James," Rangi said one evening, his voice heavy with sorrow. "This land is sacred. The Maori is built on the burial ground of our ancestors. You cannot sell it. You cannot desecrate it. The spirits will not allow it." But James couldn't stop. He thought perhaps if he finished the lodge, the spirits would leave him alone. But the curse of the land had already taken hold, and it wasn't just after him anymore. In a final act of desperation, James returned to the Maori with Lillian, his arms holding her tightly as if he could protect her from the ancient wrath that had overtaken her. He stood before the Maori, the haka roaring in his ears, and with all the strength he had left, he knelt and begged for forgiveness. "I return the land to you," he shouted. "I give it back." Rangi stood beside him, his expression unreadable. He had brought the elders with him, and together they performed a ritual to cleanse the land. As the sun began to set, the haka finally stopped. The warriors faded into the mist, the land's anger appeased, for now. But as James looked back at the Maori, a shiver ran down his spine. The spirits were still there, watching, waiting for the next trespasser. And he knew, deep down, that the land had never truly forgiven. Story number 6. Aria Moana had never been one to shy away from a story. As an investigative journalist, she thrived on uncovering secrets, exposing lies, and digging deep into the darkest corners of history. But when she first heard about the Kahu Huruhuru, a sacred feather cloak, surfacing at an estate auction in Wellington, she thought it was just another piece of antiquity with a good backstory. She couldn't have been more wrong. The cloak had belonged to a Maori chief, Paiwenua, a man of great power and influence. Aria had heard whispers of his name in the past, mostly stories passed down from her grandmother about his legendary Charisma, his ability to sway entire tribes with just a few words. Paiwenua was said to be a warrior, a leader, but also a man whose methods were far from pure. His ambition was fueled by blood, literally. When Arya arrived at the auction, she could feel the heavy atmosphere, thick with anticipation. Collectors, historians, and museum curators filled the room, their eyes gleaming with the prospect of acquiring something priceless. The auction house buzzed with quiet chatter, but when the Kahu Huruhuru was unveiled, everything fell silent. It was stunning. The feathers, dark as night, shimmered in the dim light, each one intricately woven into a design that looked almost alive. The cloak's power was undeniable even from across the room. Arya felt it, an electric pull, like a whisper in the back of her mind, calling her closer. But it wasn't the cloak's beauty that intrigued her. It was its history, and the fact that it had been lost to time until now. The auction was fierce, with bids climbing higher and higher. But in the end, it was Moira, the museum curator Arya had worked with on a few stories, who won the cloak. Moira's voice was calm as she spoke, but her eyes betrayed her excitement. "This will be the centerpiece of our new exhibit," she said, inspecting the cloak. "We've been looking for this for years." Arya was skeptical. She could feel the energy of the room shift as soon as Moira touched the cloak, but she couldn't pinpoint why. Something about the way it seemed to shimmer, as if alive, unsettled her. But she pushed the thought aside. Moira was a professional, after all. That night, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had tried to gather details on the cloak's past, but the records were sparse, filled with contradictions. Some claimed the cloak had been passed down through generations of chiefs. Others said it had been lost to history. But every source seemed to agree on one thing. Paiwenua's reign was built on blood, sacrifice, and something much darker than mere political power. The next day, Arya visited the museum to speak with Moira about her findings. She had uncovered something disturbing. The cloak was rumored to be cursed. It was said that every wearer of the Kahu Huruhuru would be blessed with power, but at a terrible cost. Their soul would be drained, piece by piece, until they were nothing more than a vessel for the spirit of Paiwenua himself. When she arrived at the museum, Moira was wearing the cloak. The moment Arya saw her, she knew something was wrong. Moira's eyes were wide, almost manic, and her movements were too smooth, too perfect. She stood taller, her posture straighter, like someone who had just discovered a new sense of strength. "Moira?" Arya asked, stepping forward. "What's happening?" Moira didn't answer immediately. She just smiled, a slow, almost unnerving grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're right about the cloak," she said, her voice smooth, seductive. "It does give power. I can feel it." Arya's pulse quickened. "You need to take it off," she said, her voice firm. "It's cursed. You're losing yourself." But Moira's smile only widened. "No, Arya. I'm not losing anything. I'm gaining everything." Arya left the museum, her mind racing. She had to find out more. She couldn't let Moira fall any further into the cloak's grip. She reached out to Hemi, a local historian and descendant of Paiwenua. If anyone knew the truth about the cloak, it would be him. They met at a small cafe, and Hemi didn't waste any time. The cloak was created by Paiwenua himself. He explained, his voice heavy with the weight of his ancestors' secrets. He wasn't just a chief. He was a Tohunga, a high priest, and he used the cloak in his ritual sacrifices. The feathers were from sacred birds, but they were soaked in the blood of those he killed. He believed the cloak would give him eternal life, that it would bind his spirit to it. But it didn't work that way. Arya's stomach twisted. What do you mean? Peiwenua's spirit is bound to the cloak. Anyone who wears it doesn't just gain power, they become a vessel for him. His will, his ambition, his rage. They lose themselves bit by bit until they become him, and then they do his bidding. Arya's hands clenched into fists. I have to stop this. That night, Arya returned to the museum, determined to stop Moira from losing herself completely. She had to destroy the cloak. She had to burn it, break it, do anything, to rid the world of Peiwenua's cursed spirit. But as she entered the gallery, she froze. Moira stood at the center of the room, the cloak draped over her shoulders, her head tilted back in a posture of absolute dominance. Her eyes were no longer hers. They were cold, calculating, and full of malice. I can feel him, Arya, Moira said, her voice no longer her own. He's inside me. I've become him. Arya's heart hammered in her chest. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't let Moira be lost to this. But she also knew that if she didn't destroy the cloak, it would just find another victim. With trembling hands, she reached out, feeling the soft feathers brush against her skin as she took the cloak from Moira's shoulders. She put it on, hoping the power it promised would be enough to break the curse. The moment the cloak settled over her shoulders, Arya felt a rush of power, an overwhelming surge of confidence, strength, and control. But it came at a price. She could feel pieces of herself slipping away, like fragments of her soul were being torn from her and absorbed into the cloak. I am Peiwenua, she whispered, the voice not quite her own. I am his will. But in that moment, she understood the truth. The cloak was not just a piece of fabric. It was a prison, a trap for anyone foolish enough to wear it. And she had fallen into it. With a scream, Arya ripped the cloak from her body, throwing it to the ground. But the damage had been done. Her soul was now a part of Peiwenua's forever. As the cloak burned in the flames, the room filled with a terrible silence. But in the distance, Arya could still hear the echo of Peiwenua's voice, calling to her from the depths of the darkness. The cloak was gone, but its spirit was not. It waited for the next person foolish enough to wear it. Story number 7. Tena Rua had always lived in the small, close-knit Maori village of Tuhoro. The kind of village where everyone knew everyone, and nothing ever happened without someone noticing. It was a peaceful place, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, the kind of place where the sound of birds and the rustling of leaves was the loudest thing you'd hear. That was until the roadwork began. It started one morning with the usual hum of bulldozers and excavators. A crew was digging up the earth along the main road, preparing for a new stretch of tarmac to connect the village to the city. At first, Tena didn't think much of it. He was busy with his schoolwork, trying to make sense of his place in the world. But when the workers uncovered the adze, a toki, an ancient Maori tool used for carving, everything changed. The moment the workers found it, something shifted in the air. It was a strange thing, how a simple object could affect so much. The toki was unlike anything Tena had ever seen. It was made of dark stone, its surface worn smooth from centuries of use, but it had an eerie beauty. And as the workers carefully lifted it from the dirt, the air seemed to grow heavy. At first, Tena thought it was just the heat of the day playing tricks on his mind, but then he heard it. Soft at first, almost like a whisper. A lullaby. It was faint, barely audible over the noise of the machinery, but it was there, clear as day. A mournful tune, old and sad, sung in a language that Tena knew deep in his bones. It wasn't a lullaby meant for comfort. It was a morning chant, a song of loss. The workers were uneasy, shifting uncomfortably as they continued their task, but no one could explain what they were hearing. That's when it started. One by one, workers began to die. The first was Kahu, a tall, quiet man who had worked in the village for years. He collapsed on the job site one afternoon, his body convulsing as if something were tearing through him from the inside. The only sound was the eerie lullaby, still playing softly in the background, like a haunting soundtrack. To his death, they rushed him to the hospital, but he never made it. No one could explain what had happened. The second death came just days later. This time, it was Jono, a younger man who'd only recently joined the crew. His death was even more mysterious. He was found in the middle of the night, sprawled out near the edge of the construction site, his eyes wide open, his expression frozen in terror. The lullaby was still there, singing faintly, though no one could say where it was coming from. It didn't take long for the whole village to become gripped with fear. The deaths kept happening, one after the other, each marked by the sound of that same haunting lullaby. People began to avoid the roadwork site altogether, and the mayor, Kemp, was quick to downplay the deaths, suggesting it was all some strange coincidence that no one should panic. But Taina knew something was wrong. He could feel it deep inside. Taina's uncle, Wiremu, was one of the few who still believed in the old ways. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. Taina went to him one evening, after hearing the lullaby again, clearer this time, in his own home. "Uncle Wiremu," Taina said, his voice trembling, "I need to know what's going on. The Toki, it's calling, it's killing people." Wiremu studied him carefully, his face grave. "The Toki is no ordinary tool," he said slowly. "It was used long ago by Mariana, a mother whose child was stolen from her. The Toki was hers, and when her son was killed, she cursed it. The lullaby you hear is her morning chant. She wants her son back." Taina's heart raced as Wiremu continued. Mariana was betrayed by the men of her tribe, men who killed her baby and stole him away. Her grief became a curse, and the Toki was bound to her sorrow. Now it calls to those who come too close. "Why is it calling to me?" Taina asked, his voice barely a whisper. Wiremu looked at him long and hard. "Because you are her son, Taina. The Toki calls to you because you are the reincarnation of Mariana's lost child." Taina's blood ran cold. He felt as if the earth beneath him was crumbling away. "I'm her son." Wiremu nodded. "You are the one the Toki has been waiting for. You are the one who can end the curse, but at a great cost." With Wiremu's guidance, Taina learned more about Mariana's tragic story. She had been a mother full of love, but when her son was killed, her grief turned to something darker. She had been betrayed by her own people, and her sorrow gave birth to a curse that would never let go of the Toki. But Taina couldn't shake the feeling that the Toki was calling to him, just as Wiremu had said. It had become more than just a song. It was a part of him now, a piece of his soul that seemed to echo with each note of the lullaby. He knew what he had to do. He had to return the Toki to its resting place, to the site of his past life. He had to reunite the spirit of Mariana with her child's remains and end the deaths that had been caused by the cursed tool. But when Taina went back to the construction site, he found that the lullaby was louder than ever. It was almost as if the Toki had grown more insistent, more desperate. The workers had all left by now, and the area was quiet. Too quiet. With trembling hands, Taina took the Toki and buried it deep in the earth, where it had originally been found. He whispered a prayer to Mariana, asking for forgiveness, for peace. As he placed the toki in the ground, he felt a weight lift from his chest, and the lullaby faded. For a moment, Taina thought it was over, but then, that night, he woke to the sound of the lullaby again. It was soft, distant, as if it were calling to him from the edge of a dream. Taina's heart clenched. The curse was broken, but the spirit of Mariana remained, watching over him, still grieving for her lost child. He closed his eyes, the sound of the lullaby filling his mind once again. It wasn't a song of death anymore. It was a song of longing, of a mother who could never forget. Taina knew he would hear it for the rest of his life, in his dreams and in the quiet moments when the world seemed still. The lullaby would never, truly leave him. But in his heart, he understood. He had ended the deaths, and that was enough. Still, each night the lullaby would sing, and Taina, now bound to the past, would listen. Story number 8. Harper Lau had always been a woman of reason. A musicologist by trade, she prided herself on her understanding of the history and science behind sound. But when she stumbled upon the recording of the forbidden Waiata, her skepticism was tested in ways she couldn't have imagined. It all started on a rainy afternoon when she received a message from Josh, a young podcaster she'd met at a conference a few months ago. His voice came through the phone, frantic and urgent. "Harper, you've got to hear this," he said. "I found something. It's a recording of an ancient Waiata, but it's not like any song I've ever heard." Harper listened with a frown, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her desk as she tried to shake off the feeling of unease that crept up her spine. The recording was raw, jagged, the sound distorted in a way that made it feel almost alive. It was haunting, yes, but there was something more, something unsettling about it. "What is this?" she asked, her voice betraying her growing concern. "It's been passed around online. People are saying it's a curse, but I don't know. I think it's just a myth," Josh replied. Harper wasn't sure what to make of it, but she did what any scholar would do. She dove into the research. After all, she was a woman of logic, not superstition, but the more she dug, the more she found. The Waiata wasn't just an old song. It was something far darker. The song's lyrics were lost in time, but the melody was unmistakable, tugging at something deep in Harper's core, something primal. She tracked down Mahina, a traditional singer, who told her stories of the song that had been passed down in whispers for generations. Mahina's eyes had widened in disbelief when Harper mentioned the song. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Mahina said, her voice low. "That Waiata, it was never meant to be heard by outsiders. It's a song that was made to bind a taniwa, a monstrous spirit. Its sound was used to trap it, to keep it sealed away." Harper's brow furrowed. "A taniwa? That's a myth. Mahina, you can't seriously believe—" "I didn't believe it either," Mahina interrupted, her voice trembling, "until I heard the song, the forbidden Waiata. It was never meant to be heard again. Whoever sings it, whoever listens to it, they die." Harper couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that crawled up her neck. She had heard of taniwa before. Large, mythical creatures that protected certain places. But to think that something as simple as a song could imprison one? But the worst part was what Mahina said next. "Going viral," Mahina whispered, "has weakened the taniwa's prison. The more people hear it, the more it awakens." Harper didn't have much time. Josh had been one of the first to leak the recording, and now the song was everywhere. On social media, streaming sites, even podcasts. The entire world was listening to it, and people were dying. It started small. A teenager in Auckland, a group of hikers in Rotorua. But then it spread faster than anyone could keep track of. Every death came with the same warning. The victim had heard the song within the week before their death. It was a curse, spreading like a virus. The virus of a song. Harper raced against the clock, feeling the weight of the world bearing down on her. She had to decode the lyrics, find the source of the song, and return it to its rightful place before she was next. As she listened to the recording again, trying to make sense of it, she couldn't help but feel the pull of its melody. The mournful notes seemed to call to her like a whisper from the past, tugging at her soul. The closer Harper got to the truth, the more desperate she became. She realized the song wasn't just a curse, it was a prison, a lock on the Taniwa's power. But now, with the song out in the world, the Taniwa was waking up. Its power was growing stronger with each note played, each person who heard it. Harper found the original location where the song was recorded, a remote cave by the sea, a place sacred to the Maori. There, the song had been written centuries ago to bind the Taniwa, to keep it from wreaking havoc. But with the song now spreading uncontrollably, the Taniwa's power was leaking, and soon it would break free entirely. "I have to go," Harper said, standing on the edge of the cave, looking down at the ocean below. She wasn't sure she believed in curses or Taniwa, but she knew this much. The song had to be silenced, or everyone would die. Harper stood in the cave, holding the ancient recording device she had brought with her. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below seemed distant, like an echo of something forgotten. She could hear the faint hum of the song in her ears, like it was always there now, growing louder, calling her. She played the song one last time, only this time she did something no one had done before. She sang the song backward, matching the rhythm and melody, pulling every note and lyric into place. As her voice rose and fell, she could feel the weight of the Taniwa's power, heavy, suffocating, pushing against her chest. For a moment, everything went still, and then the Taniwa's presence was gone. The music faded, the air cleared, and Harper collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. The curse had been broken, the Taniwa's prison sealed once more, but it came at a cost. Harper opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The song had taken her voice. She had traded it to silence the curse. Harper returned to the world, but she was different. Her work was known, her name spoken in whispers, but she no longer had the power to speak. Her voice was gone, silenced by the ancient Waiata. But she didn't regret it. The Taniwa was sealed once again, and the deaths had stopped. And sometimes in the quiet moments of the night, when Harper would lie awake, she would hear the faintest echo of the song, the same haunting lullaby, a reminder of what she had done to save the world. The song was over, but it would never truly leave her. Story number 9. Matua Harris had always been a quiet man, a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. He worked the night shift as a security guard at the Tamaki Museum, a building full of ancient treasures and stories. It wasn't the best job, but it was steady work, and it kept him away from the emptiness that clung to his home after the death of his wife, Mele. He wasn't looking for company, just a distraction from the memories that seemed to suffocate him during the day. On his first night working at the museum, Matua had passed by the ceremonial waka, a large Maori canoe that had been on display for years. He didn't think much of it at first, just a piece of history among many others. The waka was beautifully crafted, covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell stories of warriors long dead. But there was something about it that gave him a chill, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up whenever he stood too close. One night, as he did his usual rounds, Matua noticed something strange. The waka was bleeding. First, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but when he stepped closer, the carvings along the sides of the canoe were wet, dripping a dark, almost black liquid. Matua froze, unsure of what he was seeing. He reached out to touch the blood, but his hand stopped just short of the canoe's side. Something about it felt wrong. Very wrong. His heart pounded in his chest and his mind raced. He knew the waka had been part of a collection that had been dug up from an ancient burial site, but there were no records of it being cursed. Still, the bleeding carvings seemed to tell a different story. The next night, Matua called Dr. Caitlin Ross, the museum curator. She was a serious woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, but even she couldn't explain the blood. The museum had no explanation. There was nothing in the records that would explain the strange occurrence. Caitlin assured him it was probably a natural phenomenon, some kind of chemical reaction or defect in the wood, but Matua didn't believe it. That evening, as he walked the museum halls, he began hearing whispers. Soft, at first, like the wind, brushing through the trees, but then they grew louder. Voices calling his name, distant yet urgent. He stopped in front of the waka, his heart racing. The blood was gone, but the whispering voices remained. It was then that Matua realized something he hadn't noticed before. The eyes on the carvings, small, hauntingly lifelike, seemed to be staring right at him. And then, in the silence of the empty museum, the whispers turned into full sentences. "You are one of us," they said. Matua's blood ran cold. The next few nights were a blur of strange occurrences. He would hear the whispers again, louder, now coming from the waka. And every time, they seemed to grow more urgent, more desperate. He would find himself walking toward the canoe, compelled by something he couldn't explain. His mind was clouded by the sound of their voices, which seemed to pull him into a dark, dreamlike state. Dr. Ross had no answers. Neither did anyone else at the museum. But as Matua's unease grew, he began to turn to someone who might know more. Aroha, a spiritual advisor he'd met once during a Maori cultural ceremony years ago. When Matua told Aroha about the bleeding waka, she nodded solemnly, as if she had been expecting something like this. "The waka was stolen," Aroha said quietly. "It was part of a burial expedition, an excavation. But those warriors, they never received a proper burial. Their spirits are trapped, bound to that canoe. They are angry, lost." Matua frowned. "But why is it happening now? Why me?" Aroha's eyes locked onto his. "You have ancestral ties to the warriors, Matua. They are calling to you. You are the only one who can set them free." Matua spent the following days researching his lineage, searching for any connection between his ancestors and the warriors of the waka. What he uncovered shocked him. His great-grandfather had been a warrior, part of a tribe that had once fought, alongside the very men whose spirits were now trapped in the canoe. His ancestors had been part of a war that had caused great suffering, a war that had ended with betrayal. The warriors whose spirits had been taken, those who had never received a proper burial, had been left to wander between worlds, their souls bound to the waka. Matua was the last living descendant of those who had failed them. He was the link between their lost spirits and the living world. He was the key to freeing them. One night, as Matua stood alone in front of the waka, the whispers were louder than ever. The eyes on the canoe seemed to glow, and he could almost see the faces of the warriors twisted in agony. They were reaching out to him, pleading for release. Matua knew what he had to do. He had to return the waka to the sea, to the place where it had once been used to carry warriors into battle, to the place where it had been meant to rest in peace. But as he prepared to move the waka, something deep inside him resisted. The spirits didn't want to be freed. They wanted revenge. The canoe shook as if it were alive, and the whispers turned into screams, the voices rising in fury. Matua's heart raced as he struggled to steady himself. He knew the only way to silence the spirits, to release them once and for all, was to return the waka to its resting place. With the help of Aroha and Dr. Ross, they moved the canoe back to the sea, to the place where it had originally been taken from. Matua stood in the sand, staring out at the ocean as the waves lapped at the shore. When the waka hit the water, something shifted in the air. The spirits of the warriors seemed to rise from the canoe, their faces now calm, their bodies at peace. The whispers stopped, and the museum was silent for the first time in weeks. But as Matua turned to leave, he heard it. A voice, soft but unmistakable, coming from the waves. Matua Harris. His heart skipped a beat. He looked out at the sea, but there was nothing there. No faces, no figures, just the gentle roll of the tide. The waka was gone, but the waves would always whisper his name, a reminder of the spirits he had set free, and the price he had paid for it. For as long as Matua lived, the sea would call to him, and no matter where he went, the whispers would follow. Story number 10. Lena Tai had always felt a deep connection to the ocean. As a marine biologist, her days were spent underwater, studying coral reefs, the movements of fish, and the quiet rhythm of the sea. The ocean was vast, mysterious, and, to her, always welcoming. But there were things about it, ancient things, that Lena had never fully understood, things she never wanted to understand. It all started when Finn, a seasoned diver, brought up a necklace from the deep. It was the kind of thing divers dream of finding. Something rare, something valuable. The necklace was strung with several large, perfectly sharpened shark teeth. Each one had a deep black sheen, like polished stone, and they were large, too large. Some of them even had carvings etched into their surfaces. Finn was thrilled, grinning like a child on Christmas morning as he presented it to Lena. But when she saw it, a chill ran down her spine. There was something wrong about it. Something primal, ancient. "I found it in a sunken cave," Finn said, his voice tinged with excitement. "Buried under some rocks. It's got to be centuries old." Lena looked at the necklace carefully, her trained eyes scanning the teeth. This is wrong, Finn," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just a relic. It's an offering. To something. To someone." Finn laughed, shaking his head. "It's just a necklace, Lena. A cool find. We could sell it, make some money." But Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something had been disturbed. It was as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. The disappearances started a week later. First, it was Liam, another diver who had helped retrieve the necklace. He was found floating in the open water, his body mangled and torn, his eyes wide open in terror, though there was no sign of what had done it. No shark, no predator. It was as if something had ripped him apart, but without leaving a trace. Then came Maria. She had been on the dive with Finn when they found the necklace. She had gone missing during a dive, leaving behind only her oxygen tank, abandoned on the sea floor. No body was ever found. Finn didn't know what to do. The panic in his eyes was palpable as he called Lena, begging her to come help, though he didn't know how. He was terrified. "I'm telling you, Lena," Finn said, his voice frantic. "It's the necklace. It's cursed. I don't know how, but the others are gone. It's connected to that damn thing. We need to get rid of it." But Lena wasn't so sure. She didn't believe in curses. She didn't believe in superstition. But there was something about the necklace that had always bothered her. and the deaths weren't just coincidence. The ocean had a way of punishing those who didn't understand it, who treated it as an object to be conquered and not as something to be respected. Lena decided to investigate. She took the necklace with her and visited Mateen, an old ocean priest, someone who still respected the old ways of the sea. Mateen had always warned her about the dangers of meddling with things she didn't understand. "You've awakened something, Lena," Mateen said when she showed him the necklace. His face grew grim as he ran his fingers over the shark teeth, the carvings on them making his eyes narrow with recognition. These teeth belonged to the guardians of the sea. Each one was once worn by a creature, one of Tangaroa's chosen, his guardians. The shark, the whale, the giant squid, the creatures of the deep. They're not just teeth. They are his teeth. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "Tangaroa?" she whispered. "The god of the sea?" Mateen nodded solemnly. "Tangaroa's wrath is ancient. Those who disturb his offerings, who steal from him, bring disaster upon themselves. The necklace was an offering to him, a sacrifice to keep his guardians bound. But now it's been taken, and with it, the wrath of the sea is unleashed." That night, Lena went out to the shore alone, holding the necklace tightly in her hands. She felt the weight of it, the ancient power that seemed to pulse from it like a beating heart. She wasn't sure what to do. She didn't believe in curses, didn't believe in the supernatural. But the deaths, the disappearances, they weren't coincidences. As she stood there staring out at the waves, Lena heard something. A low rumble, deep beneath the water, almost like a growl. The water churned, and the air around her seemed to grow heavy, pressing in on her chest. She looked down at the necklace in her hands and heard a voice. Not in words, but in a feeling. Return it. Suddenly, the water splashed and roiled in front of her, and she saw something large, a shape moving beneath the surface, circling, waiting. The water rippled like it was alive. The guardians were coming. The next morning, Lena was determined to end it. She had to return the necklace to the sea, to the place where it belonged, to stop the wrath that had been unleashed. She took the necklace to the same sunken cave where it had been found, diving into the depths of the water, her breath shallow, her heart racing. But as she swam deeper, the water grew colder, darker. The shadows of the ocean seemed to close in, around her. Her body trembled as she reached the bottom of the cave, where the stones were slick and the air was thick with the scent of salt and decay. The water was still, but the tension in the space felt palpable. She held the necklace above the water, her hand shaking, and whispered a prayer to Tangaroa. "I return what was taken," she said. "Please forgive us." As she let go of the necklace, the water seemed to inhale. The necklace sank into the depths, disappearing from sight. For a moment, nothing happened. The water was still, calm. Then, suddenly, the ocean seemed to explode. The water around Lena churned violently, waves crashing against the rocks. She was thrown into the current, pulled by something unseen. Lena fought to keep her head above the water, but the ocean was yet too powerful. The guardians were angry, their wrath unstoppable. And then, just as quickly as it had started, everything stopped. The ocean calmed, the waves smoothing out like nothing had happened. Lena floated in the water, gasping for air. The necklace was gone, returned to where it belonged. But as she swam back to the shore, she felt the ocean watching her, its gaze heavy, its anger soothed but never forgotten. Lena returned to the safety of her home, but the ocean had seen her. It knew her name, knew her face, and no matter where she went, she would always hear the waves, calling to her in the dead of night, whispering her name. The wrath of Tangaroa had been silenced, but the ocean would never forget. It would always remember the one who dared to disturb its depths.